Take a look in your fridge right now. That tub of cottage cheese sitting on the shelf, the one you bought from Woolworths or Coles thinking you were making a clean, high-protein choice? What if I told you that the white paste inside is not real cottage cheese, but an industrially glued-together illusion engineered to stretch corporate profit margins? You flip the tub over expecting milk and salt, but instead you find a cocktail of thickeners, seaweed extracts, and synthetic gums, with more in common with wallpaper paste than traditional dairy farming. By the time you finish watching this investigation, you will know exactly how Australian supermarket dairies pulled off this food deception, how to spot an industrially reconstructed tub in under 10 seconds, and which 6 household brands are cutting serious corners. I will show you the lab data behind these additives, crack open the corporate moves that ruined classic recipes, and reveal the 3 genuine, clean Australian brands still doing it properly. And stay tuned, because the most shocking brand on our avoid list is an absolute Australian household icon that millions trust every day. Before naming names, we need to understand how cottage cheese is actually supposed to be made versus how modern factory plants cheat the process. Traditional cottage cheese is one of the simplest foods on earth. You take fresh milk, add live cultures to ferment it, add rennet to form curds, drain off the liquid whey, and fold in fresh cream with a pinch of salt. That is literally it. 3 or 4 wholesome ingredients working in natural harmony. The natural fat in the cream coats the curd, creating a rich texture that stays suspended naturally. When you make cottage cheese properly, real cream and high-quality milk are expensive inputs that eat into corporate profits. So food engineers at major dairies came up with a clever shortcut. Instead of using rich milk and real cream, they start with the cheapest, thinnest skim milk or reconstituted milk solids. But because skim milk curds collapse into a watery puddle on their own, factories have to rebuild the structure from scratch using chemical scaffolding. This is where the industry tricks come into play. To stop watery liquid from separating, industrial processors dump in vegetable gums like guar gum, locust bean gum, and xanthan gum. To create the illusion of a rich dressing without real cream, they mix in modified starches and maltodextrin. To make matters worse, many brands add processed eucuma seaweed, known as carrageenan, a stabilizing agent that binds water so the tub stays unnaturally thick on the shelf. It is the culinary equivalent of buying a luxury car, discovering the engine was swapped for a lawnmower motor, and having the dealer fill the chassis with expanding foam to keep it from sagging. You are paying for real Australian dairy, but consuming a skim base held together by industrial emulsifiers and preservatives. Now that you know how the game is rigged, let us expose the 6 brands in Australian supermarkets playing it most aggressively. Let us roll right into the worst offenders sitting on Australian supermarket shelves, starting from the sneaky cost cutters and scaling up to the absolute nationwide icons that have completely betrayed our trust. If you are already itching to check your own fridge, subscribe right now. It only gets rougher from here. Coming in at number 6 on the avoid list is Bulla cottage cheese. Bulla is one of Australia's oldest family-owned dairy processors, kicking off in Victoria back in 1910. They sell us this picturesque story of country air, happy cows, and wholesome Aussie heritage. But flip over a tub of their cottage cheese original or low-fat, and the golden farm image evaporates. Right there in black and white, you will find thickener 1442, which is hydroxypropyl distarch phosphate, alongside xanthan gum and guar gum. Instead of letting natural curd structure and fresh cream do the heavy lifting, Bulla relies on modified starch to lock in moisture and stretch out the batch yield. You scoop it out and it has this bouncy, slightly slimy texture that coats the roof of your mouth like wallpaper paste rather than light, fresh curd. At around $4.20 for a 500-gram tub at Woolworths, you are essentially paying premium dairy prices for modified plant starches. Dietitian Dr. Sarah Hughes noted in a recent food processing review that modified starches in daily dairy staples add unnecessary glycemic load without any micronutrient benefits. The verdict? Bulla takes a century of dairy heritage and smothers it in industrial thickeners just to save a few cents on cream. Moving to number 5, we have Paul's Cottage Cheese. Owned by Parmalat, which is a subsidiary of the massive French multinational Lactalis, Paul's is a giant across Queensland and the eastern seaboard. They push a heavy campaign around supporting Aussie farmers, but their manufacturing playbook comes straight from European corporate headquarters. Check the back of a Paul's low-fat cottage cheese tub. You will spot vegetable gums 412 and 415, guar gum and xanthan gum, plus acidity regulators, preservatives like potassium sorbate, and added whey powder. They strip the natural fat out of the milk, leaving a thin, greyish liquid, then dump in dry whey powder and industrial gums to artificially pump the protein stats back up on the front panel. When you eat it, it leaves an artificial chemical aftertaste and a grainy residue on your tongue. Selling at roughly $4.50 per tub, it is an absolute rip-off when you calculate that a quarter of the tub's volume is held together by hydrocolloids. Independent food database Open Food Facts classifies this as Nova Group 4 ultra-processed food. That puts a tub of supposed health food in the exact same processing bracket as a packet of instant noodles or a chocolate bar. Two different brand names on the shelf, one corporate parent cutting corners behind the scenes. At number 4, we hit Woolworths' own brand Cottage cheese. The cheap price tag, around $3.10 for 500 grams, might look tempting during a cost of living crisis, but what you are actually buying is a lab experiment in cost reduction. The ingredient list is a disaster zone. Milk solids, thickeners, 1422 and 1442, guar gum, carrageenan, and preservative 202. That is pause on carrageenan, listed as additive 407. Extracted from red seaweed, carrageenan is used to stop whey from separating. Peer-reviewed gastroenterology research, including studies highlighted by Choice Australia, shows that carrageenan can trigger intestinal inflammation and distress sensitive guts. Furthermore, Woolworths makes zero commitment regarding RBST-free certification or strict herd standards for their budget white label lines. When Choice ran supermarket quality audits, store-brand dairy products repeatedly ranked lowest in texture and ingredient purity. It feels rubbery, tastes faintly sour and metallic, and watery separation occurs within 2 days of opening despite all the gums. You think you are saving $1, but you are paying for 5 separate industrial additives designed solely to stop cheap, watered-down milk solids from liquefying in the tub. Taking the third spot is Coles brand Cottage cheese. Much like its Woolies rival, Coles charges a low price of $3.10, but the compromise on quality is glaringly obvious. The label lists reconstituted skim milk, milk solids, modified starch 1442, locust bean gum, guar gum, and potassium sorbate. Count them up. 3 separate thickeners and a chemical mold inhibitor in a basic fresh cheese that traditionally requires 0 additives. Reconstituted skim milk means they took fresh milk, dried it into powder to store it cheaply, shipped it across the country, added tap water, and then glued it back together with gums. The glycemic index of modified starches like 1442 can spike blood sugar far quicker than whole dairy fats. On top of that, Food Standards Australia New Zealand recall records show that contract manufacturing plants producing white label dairy for major supermarkets have suffered multiple sanitation and temperature failure recalls over the past 5 years. When you dig into a tub of Coles Cottage cheese, you are eating a frankenfood built from powder and glue. The low price isn't a bargain. It is an accurate reflection of cheap industrial filler. At number 2 is Dairy Farmers Cottage cheese. Distributed by Bega Cheese after their massive corporate acquisition spree, Dairy Farmers is a household name that generations of Australians have grown up with. People reach for this green and white tub at Coles and Woolies without even thinking, assuming it is pure, local farm produce. That blind trust is exactly why this one hurts the most. Flip the tub and you will find an extensive chemical roll call. Modified starch, guar gum, xanthan gum, carrageenan, and added natural flavorings. Why does fresh cottage cheese need added flavoring? Because the base dairy has been processed so intensely that all natural milk flavor is stripped out, forcing them to spray artificial dairy aroma back into the vat. Texture-wise, it is lumpen, chalky, and leaves a film on your palate. At $4.60 for 500 grams, it is one of the most expensive options on the commercial shelf. Consumer reviews on productreview.com regularly complain about slimy batch variations and sour liquid pooling at the top. HP Hood and major processing partners tied to large dairy cooperatives have faced massive recalls overseas for plastic fragments and mislabeling, proving that mega-scale factory automation often leads to sloppy quality control. Dairy Farmers charges a premium price for nostalgia while delivering a tub packed with seaweed extract and starch fillers. And finally, the number 1 absolute worst culprit on our list, Jalna cottage cheese and the rotating regional value tubs like Farmers Union. Jalna builds its entire brand identity around traditional pot-set purity and gut health halo marketing. You see that pot-set logo in the fridge at Harris Farm or Coles and assume you are getting pure artisanal goodness. But when you examine their commercial cottage cheese formulations, the illusion completely shatters. They use non-fat milk bases aggressively fortified with milk solids, tapioca starch, vegetable gums 410, 412, and 415, plus acidity regulators. The sheer invisibility of this deception makes it the ultimate villain. The front of the tub screams natural, healthy, and traditional pot set, tricking health-conscious Australians into paying top dollar, often over $5.50 a tub. Yet inside, you are getting an ultra-processed paste where fat-free milk is artificially thickened with 3 different plant gums and modified tapioca starch to mimic the creaminess of real fat. It is the ultimate marketing illusion, charging boutique prices for an industrial recipe designed purely to maximize corporate yield. You are not buying authentic dairy craft. You are paying a massive luxury markup for a tub of cleverly disguised starch gel. Right, here comes the part that made watching this far worth it. Now that we have exposed the industrial thickening tricks and corporate cost-cutting saturating the supermarket aisles, it is time for the antidote. You do not have to settle for wallpaper paste and seaweed extract disguised as health food. There are genuine, uncompromising producers available right across Australia that still treat cottage cheese like real dairy craft. Starting at number 3 among the recommended brands is Coles Organic Cottage Cheese. For anyone wanting a widely available, budget-friendly option that completely avoids industrial thickeners, this is your entry point. Available at Coles stores nationwide, this tub costs around $4.20 for 250 grams. Flip the container over and read the ingredient panel. Certified organic skim milk, organic cream, salt, non-animal rennet, and live starter cultures. That is the entire list. No guar gum, no modified starch 1442, no carrageenan, and 0 synthetic preservatives. Because it uses real organic milk sourced from certified Australian dairy pastures, the curds hold their structure naturally. Visually, the whey separates cleanly and naturally without forming that rubbery, gelatinous gel seen in gum-heavy budget brands. It tastes clean, slightly tangy, and authentically dairy-forward. It is not quite as ultra-rich as micro-batch artisanal options, but at roughly $1.68 per 100-gram serve, it proves that supermarket home brands can deliver a clean product when they choose quality over chemical shortcuts. It is the perfect, accessible daily driver for budget-conscious shoppers who refuse to eat ultra-processed fillers. Moving up to number 2 on our recommended list is Schultz Organic Dairy Cottage Cheese. If you shop at Harris Farm markets, independent grocers, or organic specialty stores across Australia, this is a brand you should actively search for. Schultz operates out of Victoria's Western District, practicing sustainable, regenerative farming with unhomogenized organic milk. Flip their tub over and you will find 3 ingredients: certified organic milk, non-animal rennet, and culture. No added milk solids, no synthetic protein powders, and absolute 0 tolerance for vegetable hydrocolloids. Because Schultz uses unhomogenized milk from grass-fed cows, the cream naturally settles around the curds, creating a luxurious, silky mouthfeel that synthetic gums can only dream of mimicking. When you open a tub, you will notice a soft, delicate curd set with a golden, buttery hue, the natural result of beta-carotene from cows grazing on lush green grass. Priced at around $6.50 to $7.00 for a 300-gram glass jar or tub, it works out to roughly $2.20 per serve. While it sits at a higher price, it's worth it for the quality and taste 0 per serve. While it sits at a higher price point than standard supermarket tubs, every cent goes toward uncompromised farming practices and pure, unadulterated dairy processing. Choice dairy reviews and independent food critics consistently rate Schultz among the cleanest dairy ranges in the country. It is an ideal pick for food purists who want to support local, regenerative agriculture. And now, taking the number 1 spot as the absolute best cottage cheese on Australian shelves is Baramba Organics high-protein cottage cheese. This Queensland-based dairy brand produces an absolute masterpiece of clean food engineering, stocked across Coles, Woolworths, IGA, and health food stores nationwide. Flip the tub over and check the ingredient panel. Certified organic unhomogenized skim milk, non-animal rennet, and live cultures. That is all. Absolutely no guar gum, no carrageenan, no modified food starch, and 0 chemical preservatives. Yet despite having 0 added protein powders or fillers, Baramba Organics delivers a massive 24.6 grams of natural protein per 100-gram serving. Sit with that figure for a moment. That is more than double the protein density of the ultra-processed commercial brands on our avoid list, achieved purely through traditional, slow-draining curd concentration rather than dumping in dried whey powder. My home pantry. When you scoop into Baramba Organics, the difference is immediate. The curds are distinct, plump, and firm, held in a delicate natural way without any sticky gel-like residue. It tastes rich, clean, and refreshing, with a gentle, natural cultured acidity. At approximately $5.80 to $6.20 for a generous 500-gram tub, it breaks down to around $1.20 per 100-gram serve. Think about the math there. The highest quality, most protein-dense, completely additive-free cottage cheese in Australia is actually cheaper per gram of protein than the gum-loaded, starch-padded brand name alternatives sitting right next to it on the shelf. You are paying entirely for nutrient-dense, grass-fed Australian dairy, not for corporate marketing campaigns or industrial emulsifiers. Baramba Organics proves beyond any doubt that when dairy is made properly, it does not need a single chemical stabilizer to look, taste, and perform amazingly. To make sure you never get tricked in the dairy aisle again, here are 5 non-negotiable rules for buying cottage cheese in Australia. First, run the tilt test before putting the tub in your trolley. Tip the container sideways in the shop. If the liquid moves like thick slime or clings to the lid like paste, it is loaded with vegetable gums. Real dairy whey should separate like clear, clean liquid. Second, scrutinize the first 3 ingredients. You are looking strictly for milk or skim milk, cream, and live cultures or rennet. If you spot numbers like 1422, 1442, 412, or 415 in those opening lines, put it straight back. Third, watch out for the protein cheat code. If a brand advertises massive protein claims on the front panel, flip it over and verify whether whey protein concentrate or dried milk solids were dumped into the vat to inflate that number artificially. Fourth, Black Bull carrageenan entirely. Listed on Australian labels as additive 407, this seaweed extract is purely there to lock in excess water for corporate profit while causing gut distress. Fifth, ignore the front-of-pack marketing. Blue ribbons, golden cows, and words like traditional or pot set are completely unregulated buzzwords designed to distract you from an ultra-processed ingredient list on the back dot. The takeaway from this entire investigation comes down to one simple realization. The Australian dairy industry has spent decades quietly replacing real ingredients with industrial thickeners to stretch margins. They rely on the fact that you will grab a familiar brand off the Woolies or Coles shelf without reading the fine print. But now you know the game. The products loaded with the most additives are often charging you extra for the technology used to hide low-quality dairy, while clean, uncompromised brands like Baramba Organics and Schultz give you pure nutrition for your money. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive into the dairy aisle. If this video changed how you will shop on your next grocery run, share it with a friend or family member who is still buying those gum-filled tubs without flipping them over. Drop a comment below and tell me, which cottage cheese brand is sitting in your fridge right now and did it pass the test? Make sure to hit subscribe for more raw, unfiltered consumer reviews exposing what really goes into the everyday products we bring home. Stop paying for corporate shortcuts and demand real food.